Story 1. The Second Fire Ring. At 1:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of someone gently stirring our campfire. The problem was that our fire had gone out hours earlier, and the only footprints around the ring were mine, circling it twice like I'd been pacing in my sleep. I went solo camping to get away from noise, screens, and the constant feeling that life was happening too fast to hold on to. The trail was familiar, a loop I'd done before in late summer, and the site I chose sat just far enough from the main path that I wouldn't hear other campers unless they were loud on purpose. It was the kind of clearing that makes you feel lucky, surrounded by pines that were tall enough to turn the sky into a narrow window. I set up my tent before dusk, filtered water, and built a modest fire. Nothing dramatic, no survival fantasy, just the comfortable routine of making a small circle of light in a dark place. The air smelled like sap and damp earth, and when the wind shifted, I could hear the distant creak, steady and indifferent. I ate, cleaned up, and hung my food bag the way you're supposed to, then sat and watched the fire until it burned down to red coals. Before crawling into my sleeping bag, I did what I always do. I looked around slowly, not because I expected to see anything, but because the woods rewards attention. One careless habit becomes the story you tell later. Everything looked normal. No eyeshine in the brush, no strange movement, only darkness gathered between trees. I poured water on the coals until the fire hissed and died. Then I zipped the tent and let the night close. I must have slept because I remember dreaming about being back in my apartment, trying to open a door that wouldn't budge. The dream had that frustrating, heavy quality, like the air itself was resisting. When I woke, it was the sound that did it. Not a crack of a branch or the snort of a deer, but a careful, intimate sound, like someone using a stick to push through ash.
I held my breath and listened. There it was again. A soft scrape, then a faint clink, as if stones were being nudged into place. My first thought was an animal. Raccoons love campsites, but animals don't tend to fire. They don't move stones with patience, and the sound had rhythm, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I reached for my headlamp, turned it on, and aimed it through the thin tent fabric toward the fire ring. The light made the nylon glow, but it didn't show a clear silhouette, just a vague shifting, a darker patch that moved closer, then paused, like it had realized it was being watched. I whispered, "Hey," and my voice came out smaller than I expected. Silence. The scraping stopped instantly, too instantly, like a person freezing. I waited. My heart thudded against the sleeping bag. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, and then went quiet. I unzipped the tent slowly, only a few inches, just enough to let the cold air in and let me see. The clearing was dim, lit by moonlight and the pale beam from my headlamp. The fire ring sat a few yards away. The ashes inside it were disturbed. And there, right in the center, a thin tongue of flame lifted and flickered as if it had never gone out. My stomach tightened. I knew I'd drowned the coals. I'd poured water until there was nothing but black mush and steam. Yet the fire was alive again, small but stubborn, like it had been coaxed back with care. I forced myself out of the tent, shoes half on, breath visible. My headlamp beam swept the surrounding trees. Nothing moved. The woods looked still, but it was the kind of stillness that feels occupied. I walked to the fire ring and crouched. The flame danced over a small pile of twigs that I hadn't placed there. They were arranged neatly, almost politely, like someone had built a starter nest. Next to the ring, on the ground where I was certain I hadn't left anything, was my pocket knife. Open, caught the light. My hands went cold.
I didn't remember taking it out after dinner. I didn't remember leaving it open. My mind tried to rebuild the evening, searching for a moment when I could have done it absent-mindedly, but there was nothing. I was methodical. I had been alone. I would have noticed. I stood up slowly and turned in a circle, headlamp beam cutting across the trunks. Then I noticed something that made my scalp prickle. Footprints. Not animal tracks. Human prints. Barely visible because the ground was mostly pine needles, but the soft soil near the ring held them. A set of prints walked in from the tree line, approached the fire ring, and stopped. The stride was even, calm, not rushed. Then the prints continued around the ring, once, twice. A perfect circle, as if whoever made them had paced the fire in ritual, measuring it. And then they were gone. As if the person had stepped off the earth at the edge of the light. I backed away from the fire ring, keeping my beam on the footprints. The flame behind me cracked softly. That's when I heard it. A low, steady breathing sound, not from the woods, not from any direction I could point to, but from within the circle of light itself. Like the clearing was breathing. I turned my head toward my tent. The zipper was moving. Not violently, not like a bear trying to rip its way in. It slid a few centimeters, stopped, then slid again, the metal teeth whispering softly in the night. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. I had left the tent unzipped a crack when I stepped out, but not like that. The opening widened, as if someone inside had a careful hand on the zipper pull. My throat went dry. "No," I whispered. The zipper stopped. Then, from the darkness beyond the tent, a voice spoke softly, too close to the ground, as if someone was crouched on the other side. It was my voice. "Come warm up," it said, gentle and coaxing. "You're freezing." My lungs locked. I didn't answer, because every instinct told me that responding would be an agreement I didn't understand. The fire snapped once, brightening for a moment. Shadows leaped. In that flare, I saw something in the tent opening, just inside, a pale shape where my sleeping bag lay. Not a person, not clearly anything, just a suggestion of weight, as if something had settled into my place while I stood outside. My legs finally obeyed panic. I stepped backward, then another step, putting distance between me and the tent. The footprints near the fire looked darker now, as if moisture had risen from the soil to fill them again. My voice came again from the tree line, still calm, still mine. "Don't leave the circle," it said. I didn't run. Running makes noise, and noise makes you easy to follow. I walked quickly toward the trail, headlamp beam steady, focusing on the ribbon of path that would lead me back to the main route. Behind me, the fire flared higher, as if disappointed. At the edge of the clearing, I stopped, just for a second, and looked back. The fire ring was burning brighter than it had any right to, and around it, in the disturbed ash, new footprints were appearing one by one, pressing into the soot as if invisible feet were stepping in place. One circle, two circles, the exact same pacing over and over, like a loop. I kept walking until the dawn began to gray the sky. I didn't go back for breakfast. I didn't go back for my tent. I told myself I would return later with a ranger, with other people, with daylight and witnesses. When I came back that afternoon, the clearing was normal. No fire, no footprints, no tent. Only a cold circle of stones, perfectly arranged, as if someone had rebuilt my fire ring into a cleaner, more precise shape. And in the center, half buried in ash,
was my pocket knife. Closed. Story. The whistle outside the tent. The whistle started as one clear note, then a pause, then the same note again, always from just beyond the edge of my headlamp beam. The longer I stayed quiet, the more it sounded like it was learning the tune I'd been humming earlier by the fire. I wasn't alone on this trip, which is what makes the memory worse. If it had been solo, I could have blamed fatigue, imagination, the way woods can play tricks when you're tired and cold. But there were two of us, and we both heard it, and we both pretended we didn't at first. My friend Jonah and I had driven out after work on Friday, chasing the kind of weekend that feels like a reset. The campground was a patchwork of sites separated by trees, and ours was on the outer edge, close enough to the forest that the darkness felt deeper. We set up quickly, cooked something simple, and spent the evening talking about nothing important. Jonah was the kind of guy who whistled without realizing he was doing it. Not loud, not showy, just a habit, like tapping a foot. At one point, while he was stacking wood, he whistled a short tune, 3 notes rising, then 1 falling, something that sounded familiar but not quite any song I could name. "Stop," I said, laughing. "You're going to summon something." He smirked. "If something shows up, tell it to bring coffee." We both laughed because laughing makes the woods feel less vast. By midnight, the temperature dropped. The fire burned low. We doused it, zipped ourselves into our tents, and let the night settle. The campground quieted until the only sounds were the occasional wind through branches and the distant, steady rush of the creek. I fell asleep fast. I woke to Jonah whispering my name through the tent wall. "Hey," he said, low and urgent. "You awake?" My heart jumped. "Yeah," I whispered back. "What's wrong?" There was a pause. I could hear his breathing. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I held still and listened. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, a single whistle note rose out of the darkness, clean and controlled. It hung for a second, then stopped abruptly, as if the whistler had pressed a mute button. We both stayed silent. After a long beat, the note came again. Same pitch, same length, same distance. Jonah's voice was tight. "That's not me," he whispered. "I know," I whispered back, and my mouth went dry. The sound wasn't inside the campground. It was deeper in the woods, but not far. Just beyond the ring of trees that marked the edge of our sight, the boundary where the headlamp beam fades and the imagination fills the rest. The whistle sounded again, then again, and I realized, with a cold shiver, that it wasn't random. It was repeating Jonah's tune, but stripped down. One note at a time, testing it, learning it. Jonah made a soft, involuntary noise, like he'd sucked in a breath too fast. "It's copying me," he whispered. "Don't respond," I said, though I wasn't sure why I believed that would help. Another note, then a pause, then the falling note that completed the little pattern. Perfect. My skin prickled. I pictured someone standing behind a tree, lips pursed, practicing like a child who'd heard a song once and wanted to prove they could reproduce it. But the woods didn't feel like it held a person. It felt like it held an attention. Jonah shifted in his tent, and the fabric rustled. The whistle stopped instantly. A long silence stretched, thick as fog. Then a new sound came, closer. A soft footstep on pine needles. Then another. Slow, deliberate steps, approaching the campsite, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where we were. My heart hammered. I fumbled for my headlamp and turned it on, aiming it through the tent fabric toward the trees. The nylon glowed, but it
didn't reveal a clear outline. The beam didn't reach far enough. The footsteps paused. Then the whistle resumed, but it was closer now, and something in the tone had changed. It was less playful.
More insistent. Jonah whispered, "Should we shout? Tell it to go away?" "No," I breathed, and the answer felt like it came from a place deeper than thought. "Don't let it know we're awake." The whistle stopped again, and then, very softly, someone whistled from the other side of Jonah's tent, right outside it, not in the woods, at the edge of our sight. The sound was so close it felt intimate, like a breath. Jonah went rigid. I could hear it in his silence. A hand brushed the side of his tent, lightly, as if tracing the fabric. The nylon bowed inward a fraction and then released. Not a grab, not an attack. A touch. Exploratory. Careful. Then, as if the night had decided we were ready for the worst part, a voice spoke in the darkness. It was Jonah's voice. Same tone, same sleepy rasp. "Hey," it said, right outside his tent. "Come out for a second. I found something." I felt my blood go cold. Jonah and I didn't speak, but in that moment I knew he was hearing his own voice from outside, calling him like a friend. From inside his tent, Jonah whispered, "That's me." The voice outside, Jonah's voice, chuckled softly. "Yeah," it said. "It's you. Come on." I pressed my mouth to my hand to keep from making noise. The urge to respond, to argue, to tell it to stop rose in me like nausea. But something about the mimicry felt like a trap that required participation. The voice outside said Jonah's name again, gently, like a parent coaxing a child. Then it whistled the tune, perfectly, without hesitation, as if it had mastered it in minutes. I heard Jonah's zipper move, just a little. My heart lurched. I whispered, "Jonah, don't." He froze. The zipper stopped. He whispered back, barely audible, "It sounds like me." "I know," I whispered, "but it isn't." Outside, Jonah's voice sighed, impatient now. "Stop being weird," it said. "It's cold, hurry up." Then footsteps moved away from Jonah's tent, slow and deliberate, circling toward mine.
The whistle resumed, one note at a time, as if it was rehearsing itself while it walked. When it reached my tent, the sound stopped. I could feel a presence near the fabric, not touching, just standing there, close enough that the air felt different. Then my own voice spoke from outside. Soft, calm, exactly mine. "You can come out," it said. He already did. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe it was lying, but the line struck a deep fear that I wasn't seeing what was happening, that the darkness had already rearranged my reality. I listened desperately for Jonah's voice from his tent, for any sound that would prove he was still inside. Nothing. Only the wind and the faint creak of trees and the quiet patience of a thing that was excellent at waiting. I forced myself to breathe slowly, as if steadiness could be armor. I whispered, barely moving my lips, "Jonah." A pause. Then from inside Jonah's tent, his voice answered, sleepy and confused. "Yeah?" Relief hit so hard, it made my eyes sting. Outside, my voice made a small, irritated sound. "Don't do that," it said. "Don't test it." The sentence landed like ice water. The thing outside had responded to Jonah's voice from inside, as if it had been listening for exactly that, as if it understood what we were trying to confirm. Then it began to whistle again, and this time the tune wasn't Jonah's. It was a new tune, longer, more complex, with a rhythm that sounded like a pattern you could accidentally follow if you weren't careful. A tune designed to stick. I pressed my fingers to my ears, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to blur the sound. Jonah must have done the same, because the whistling went on, and we stayed silent, refusing to become part of it. Eventually, the tune faded into the woods, drifting farther until it became just another night sound. We didn't sleep after that. We waited for dawn like people waiting for rescue.
When the sun finally rose, pale and weak through the trees, we packed fast without speaking much. As we loaded the car, Jonah paused, looking back toward the campsite. "What?" I asked. He swallowed. "I can't remember the tune I whistled last night," he said. "It's gone." I stared at him. "Gone?" He nodded slowly. "But I can still hear the one it whistled," he said, voice tight. "It's stuck in my head." All the way home, neither of us whistled. Not once. Story 3. The tent with my gear inside. I found my campsite exactly where I left it, but my tent was already zipped shut. When I unzipped it, my backpack was inside, neatly packed, like someone had finished my night for me while I was still out in the woods. The third story is the one I hesitate to tell, because it makes me sound careless, and I wasn't. I've camped enough to know that most creepy experiences are just mistakes with good timing. You misplace something, the wind moves it, your mind assigns it meaning. But this wasn't misplacement, it was arrangement. I was camping in a national forest I'd visited before, a place with wide trails and designated sites marked by small posts. I checked in, took the map, and hiked to my spot before dusk. Everything about the evening felt clean and normal. A small fire, dinner, the gradual cooling of air that makes you grateful for a sleeping bag. Around 10 p.m., I realized I'd left my water filter hanging on a branch near the creek where I'd filled my bottle earlier. It wasn't far, maybe a 5-minute walk from my site, and I didn't want to leave it out overnight where an animal could chew it. I took my headlamp and walked back down the trail. The woods at night is a different world, but it was calm. My light found the familiar markers, the curve in the path, the fallen log, the sound of creek water moving over stones. I found the filter where I'd left it and clipped it back onto my pack. Then I turned to head back, and my headlamp beam caught something that made me pause. A second trail. Not on the map, not marked, but visible enough. A narrow path breaking off into the trees, as if someone had walked it often. The entrance looked darker than the woods around it, a concentrated shadow. I told myself to ignore it. Off-trail paths can lead to nothing or to trouble. But curiosity is a quiet predator, and I had that stubborn belief that the woods is only scary if you give it stories. I stepped closer to the unmarked path, just enough to see where it went. The darkness seemed to shift, as if the trees leaned in. Then, from deeper inside that path, a faint light blinked once, like a reflection. Not the steady shine of a flashlight, a single pulse. My breath caught. I waited, listening. No voices, no footsteps, only the creek. I should have turned around and gone back to my campsite. Instead, I took 3 steps into the unmarked path, headlamp beams sweeping ahead, trying to locate the source of the blink. The forest closed around me quickly. The creek sound faded. My headlamp light seemed to travel a shorter distance, swallowed by trunks and brush.
After a few more steps, I stopped, suddenly unsure of direction, which was ridiculous because I'd only moved a few yards. That's when I heard it. A zipper. Soft. Familiar. From behind me, somewhere in the direction of my campsite, a zipper sound slid through the night air like a whisper. My throat tightened. That zipper sound belonged to my tent. I knew it the way you know the sound of your own front door closing. I stood still, listening. The zipper sounded again, longer this time, as if someone was opening the tent fully. Then a pause. Then another zipper sound, smaller, like my backpack pocket. A cold wave moved through me. I turned my headlamp back toward the direction I'd come from, and for a second, my beam caught nothing but trees. Then the light flickered, once, as if it had hit a glossy surface.
I felt a pressure in my chest. Not fear alone, but a sudden conviction that I shouldn't go back quickly. That the speed of my return mattered. That rushing would be interpreted as permission. I forced myself to walk back at a normal pace, even though my nerves begged me to run. The unmarked path released me back onto the main trail in a way that felt too smooth, too cooperative. As I approached my campsite, I saw the fire ring, dark and cold. The tent stood exactly where I left it. It looked normal, too normal. The door flap was zipped shut neatly. The zipper pull centered like someone had placed it there. I stood a few feet away, headlamp beam fixed on the tent door. My mouth was dry. The woods around me felt silent, as if waiting to see what I would do. I spoke softly, mostly to break the spell. "Hello?" I said. Nothing answered. I stepped closer. The tent fabric looked slightly smoother than before, less wrinkled, as if it had been tugged and straightened. The stakes were firm. The guy lines were taut. I didn't remember making it that tidy. My fingers found the zipper pull, and I hesitated. Every horror instinct said not to open the tent. But it was my tent, my gear, my safe place. I unzipped it slowly. The smell hit me first. Warm fabric, faint detergent, and beneath it, something damp and metallic, like rainwater sitting in a pan. Inside, my backpack was there, not where I'd left it near my sleeping bag, but upright, neatly placed at the head of the tent, like a packed suitcase. The straps were tucked in. The side pockets were zipped. My water bottle was clipped correctly, and my sleeping bag was rolled tight, like it was ready to be stored. Someone had packed me up. My hands shook. I leaned in and checked the corners of the tent, expecting to find an animal, a person, anything physical. There was nothing, just my gear arranged with care. Then I saw the note. A small square of paper, folded once, placed on top of my packed sleeping bag.
I didn't carry paper notes. I didn't bring a notepad. I hadn't written anything. I unfolded it with stiff fingers. The handwriting was neat, almost formal, in dark ink. You forgot something. I stared at the words until the letters seemed to float. Then I flipped the paper over. On the back, drawn in the same ink, was a simple map. Not the official trail map, but a crude sketch. My campsite, the creek, the unmarked path, and a small circle deep in the trees with an X inside it. A route drawn from my campsite to that X. And beside the X, one more phrase. Your turn. My mouth went numb. The paper trembled in my hand. Outside the tent, in the dark just beyond my headlamp beam, something moved with the soft sound of a foot on pine needles. Not fast, not hiding, just a single step,
as if it wanted me to know it was there. I didn't look up. I didn't want to give it my eyes. I backed out of the tent slowly and zipped it shut again with trembling hands, as if sealing it could undo what had happened. My heart hammered so hard I could taste it. I grabbed my keys and my phone and left everything else. I walked down the trail toward the parking area with my headlamp steady and my breathing controlled, refusing to run, refusing to stumble, refusing to give the woods the satisfaction of panic. Behind me, somewhere in the trees, a zipper sound whispered once more. Then, faintly, the soft click of my headlamp turning off. I froze, horrified, because my headlamp was still on my forehead, still shining, which meant the click had come from another light, another headlamp. Someone else wearing it, somewhere behind me, mimicking the sound of a switch, practicing my life like a routine. I kept walking until I reached the parking lot lights. Only then did I allow myself to look back at the trail entrance. The forest stood there, dark and ordinary. But at the edge of the trees, where the shadows were deepest, a tiny light blinked once, like a headlamp turning on and off. And I understood what the note meant. It didn't want my gear, it wanted my route. It wanted me to follow the map it had drawn, to walk the unmarked path again, to arrive at the X like a scheduled appointment. I drove home without going back for my tent. A week later, I returned in daylight with a ranger to retrieve my things. The ranger found my campsite easily. My tent was still there, zipped shut. But when he unzipped it, the interior was empty. No backpack, no sleeping bag, no note. Only a clean patch of tent floor, as if it had never been used. And pressed into the fabric, right where my pillow should have been, was a single pine needle arranged like an arrow pointing toward